5,000 subscribers. I could never have expected that 18 months ago, but the view counts on my Crash Bandicoot videos started exploding in the run-up to CTR Nitro-Fueled. Since then, I've played almost every Crash game, and the views just keep going up, so it's only fitting that for my 5,000 subscriber special, I should give my thoughts on all the Crash games, and rank them based on how much I enjoyed each game. Some of these may be controversial. With that said, let's start at the beginning. The original Crash Bandicoot was one of the first 3D platformers. Mostly linear level design with few enemies but many crates, combined with challenging platforming, make for a simple but effective formula. It's also difficult, perhaps more so than any of its sequels. You need to break every crate without dying in order to get gems, and you only get one attempt at bonus rounds, which happen to be the only save points, adding an artificial level of difficulty not found in later games. It's a great game, but not without flaws.
Crash Bandicoot 2. Cortex Strikes Back.
Crash 2 took the basic concept of Crash 1, then expanded and refined it. It has a story and crystals, the ability to slide and belly flop, ice physics, mud, a jet-powered surfboard, monkey bars, and more. Bonuses now reflect the level they're in. The no death requirement for gems is gone, but in its place, death routes, gem paths, other miscellaneous hidden paths and levels. In short, it established the classic Crash formula, and is definitely one of the best Crash games.
Crash Bandicoot Warped.
So what's the next logical step in a platformer? New abilities, of course. An improved belly flop, double jump, tornado spin, and the fruit bazooka all add to the platforming experience, even if the latter is underused. And then there's the speed shoes. Love them or hate them, and I do. Time trials are a very different experience and add a whole new level of replayability. And then there's the vehicles. A jet ski, motorcycle, biplane, scuba gear, and a baby T-Rex. Variety is generally good, but if I have one criticism, it's that there are too many vehicle levels. This is the first video game I played, and for a long time it was top of this list. But now I think that Crash 2 just beats it. Crash Team Racing. A kart racing spin-off with a unique boost mechanic which is easy to pick up but hard to master. Relic races and CTR challenges make for interesting variations from standard races, and the track designs are generally good, starting fairly simple and gradually increasing in difficulty. A great game, but platforming is what Crash does best.
Crash Bash.
As a party game, Crash Bash is probably best enjoyed in multiplayer, but I've only played the single player mode, and it was dismal. It's okay at first. Crash Ball, Polar Panic, Pogo Penta, Jungle Bash, all very different. Then you beat Papu Papu, and it's basically the same set of games again, plus one new one. You beat Baminator, same again. And if you're going for all the trophies, gems and crystals, you have to beat each level 5 times. It gets very repetitive and boring very quickly, with the difficulty just ramping up all the time, and that's without even mentioning the relic challenges. It's just not fun. The worst Crash game I have ever played. The bosses are fun though.
Crash Bandicoot, the Wrath of Cortex.
The fourth mainline Crash title. No, not that one. The Wrath of Cortex pretty much copies the format of Crash 3, but that's okay, it's a good format. The Atmosphere is a surprisingly fun new addition, and vehicles are often better integrated into the platforming. You might start a level with a helipad or minecart, then transition into a regular platforming level. Alternatively, you might hop on a snowboard or jeep for a chase near the end of a level. The game has its problems though. Returning villains are reduced to mere hazards, monkey bars are painfully slow, and it has a tendency to spam nitro crates, but it's still a solid entry into the franchise. The Huge Adventure is the first handheld game in the series and largely sticks to the classic format, seemingly inspired by Crash 2 and 3. It's almost entirely 2D side-scrolling, but it's done well. Indeed, the weakest parts of the game seem to be anything which isn't side-scrolling. It's nothing spectacular, and it doesn't have as many side paths as its predecessors, but it's not a bad game. If The Huge Adventure was inspired by Crash 2 and 3, then N-Tranced is inspired by Crash 3 and the Wrath of Cortex. Egyptian, Arabian and volcanic levels are prominent, making up over half the game, but that actually works in its favour, as they're the best and most dynamic levels in the game. They have side paths with hidden gem shards. The helipack and atmosphere are back, along with the new flying carpet, and Crash has 2 new moves, the rocket jump and super slide. Definitely the best of the handheld games.
For Crash Nitro Kart!
Crash Nitro Kart is best summarised as not quite as good as Crash Team Racing. It has the same format, albeit with slower and slightly simplified driving mechanics and fewer tracks. The anti-gravity sections are an interesting gimmick, but more often result in awkward cornering than good level design. The story and characters are better fleshed out with fully animated cutscenes, however. A fun game, but not quite as fun as CTR. Crash Purple, or Crash Fusion, always seems to get a terrible reputation, so when I actually played it, I was surprised by how not terrible it was. Some levels are definitely just minigames for the sake of minigames and don't really belong, but a lot more actually just feel like regular Crash vehicle levels with crates to break along the way. It's even got Polar and the jetboard from Crash 2. And as for the bonus levels, genuinely fun, challenging, classic Crash platforming, which brings new ideas while still respecting the originals. I just wish it was a bigger part of the game. So yeah, not terrible, but it definitely has issues. Crash Twinsanity marks the start of a transition towards a more open, combat-oriented format. Most of the gameplay is with Crash, often with Cortex following or otherwise being brought along for the ride, and that's what this game does best, the interplay between Crash and Cortex and resulting hilarity. It's also more story-based. The evil twins and the 10th dimension are great concepts and a great ending to the game. However, it's very clear that there were problems during development. This game is poorly optimized with glitches, missing sound effects, levels which distract from the plot more than helping it, and more cut content than actual content. Most people seem to either love or hate Twinsanity, but I'm just going to call it mediocre. Crash Tag Team Racing is an interesting one. As a kart racer, it's definitely the worst. The driving mechanics are simpler than the other games, and it's much more fun when you just let the AI do the racing and start shooting up the track instead. But as I like to say, it's not a racing game with Crash, it's a Crash game with racing. A huge part of this game is about exploring the theme park on foot. It has puzzles, platforming, side missions, a great sense of humour, and it rewards exploration with crystals or joke cutscenes. Or chickens. It's very different to other Crash games, being the closest the series ever got to a true open world game, but it really works. A really fun game which I often find myself revisiting. Crash Boom Bang. I haven't actually played this one yet, but it seems to be universally recognised as the worst Crash game ever. And considering how much I hated the other Crash Party game, Crash Bash, I'm inclined to believe that. After all, this is a game which displays an annoying message at random intervals for the sole purpose of blocking your view. But I won't judge it until I've tried it, and so it's off the list for now. Crush of the Titans was an attempt to modernise. It had new mechanics like rope swinging, wall running, rail grinding, and using Aku Aku as a skateboard, but they all serve as a means of linear progression from one fight to the next. This is a beat-em-up more than a platformer. The movesets of the different Titans are fun to use, and the combat is good, but it gets very repetitive, often with wave after wave of the same enemies spawning in the same place. It also has an annoying tendency of forcing you to leave your Titan behind, then leaving you to try and pick one off from a larger group, all of which are trying to attack you, which just breaks up the flow of combat. There are some great moments in this game, and I enjoyed playing it. I don't even mind the redesigns, except for Tiny, but the issues with the combat, and in particular boss fights, really drag it down the rankings. Mind Over Mutant takes the basic concept of Titans and refines it. There are fewer mutant types, but they are more distinct from each other. and many of them have specific abilities for platforming, which is an important part of the game once more. The cutscenes each pay homage to different styles of film or animation, often being humorous while still driving forward both the plot and your exploration of the varied and relatively open world. My main criticism would be the amount of backtracking which happens in the middle of the game, but all in all I would consider this to be a genuinely fun and very underrated Crash game. The Sane Trilogy is of course a remake of the original trilogy. I considered excluding it for that reason, but I think it is different enough to have its own spot on the list. It addressed the issues I had with Crash 1, you can now save at any time, bonuses are replayable, and only the coloured jumps require a deathless run, which seems a more reasonable challenge. It also added optional time trials in Crash 1 and 2, along with the great new level Future Tense and the nightmare that is Stormy Ascent. The jet ski physics feel a lot heavier than before, and there has been criticism of Crash's hitbox causing you to slide off the edge of platforms, but that never really bothered me. Being able to play the PC version in glorious 60 frames per second more than makes up for any minor physics differences I noticed. This game is more than just the sum of its parts. Crash Team Racing Nitro-Fueled is a lot more than just a simple remake of the original Crash Team Racing. It also includes a lot of content from Crash Nitro Kart, plus 8 entirely new tracks, ring rally and online game modes, a challenge system, dozens of extra characters and karts, and a vast array of skins, pens and other customization options. Blue Fire also adds a whole new layer to the gameplay for tracks which support it. Based on all that, I assume I would enjoy it even more than the original game, putting it in the top tier, but it has not been released for PC, so I have not been able to play it, which is a shame. Crash Bandicoot 4, It's About Time. Based on the trailer and other gameplay footage, it looks to play just like the originals, with extra moves and abilities added in to further enhance the platforming experience. I have high hopes for this game. Perhaps it'll even top the list, but let's wait until it actually releases before rushing to judgment. Now can we please get a PC version this time? And so this is my list. All the Crash games I've played, ranked by how much I enjoyed them. From the classic platformers I will keep on playing again and again, to the more varied later games, which I thought were, for the most part, okay. The only game I really disliked was Crash Bash. So, did you agree with my list? Let me know your thoughts on the different Crash games in the comments below. And once again, thank you all for 5,000 subscribers. I might be starting to cover a wider range of games now, but it's the Crash Bandicoot fans who got me here. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.